A liberal journalist publicly mocks Barron Trump, expecting him to crumble under pressure. But his calm and stunning response not only silences the room, but leaves everyone questioning their assumptions. You won't believe what he said next. Comments below. Where are you watching from? And if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel, Life Inspirational and Motivational Tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories. Thanks. Let's start the story. The bustling studio lights shone brightly as the cameras rolled, capturing the chatter of a lively debate show. Among the panelists, Barron Trump sat quietly, his composed demeanor a stark contrast to the heated energy around him. At just 18, his calm confidence stood out, a maturity that seemed to defy his years. This was a rare appearance for Barron, who typically avoided the public spotlight. Yet, his presence on the show carried an air of quiet significance, his intent to contribute thoughtful perspectives clear in his every word. Across from him sat a seasoned liberal journalist, known for sharp wit and biting commentary. The room buzzed with anticipation. The audience, both in the studio and watching at home, knew the show thrived on moments of tension and confrontation. The journalist, famous for targeting high-profile figures, appeared particularly keen to challenge Barron. A subtle smirk played on their face as they prepared to steer the conversation toward topics they believed would catch the young man off guard. The air in the room shifted as the host introduced the next segment. The journalist leaned forward, their tone sharpening as they addressed Barron directly. In that instant, the stage was set for a confrontation that no one could have predicted, a moment that would leave the audience stunned and forever change the way people viewed Barron Trump. The discussion began innocuously enough, with topics that danced around current events and societal debates. Barron, reserved yet attentive, responded to questions thoughtfully, his words measured and deliberate. The audience, some skeptical of his presence, gradually warmed to his poised demeanor. Despite his youth, Barron carried himself with a quiet authority, his insights offering glimpses of a depth that belied his age. But the journalist, sensing an opportunity to shift the mood, leaned forward with a question that seemed designed to rattle him. Tell me, Barron, what makes you think someone your age has the right to speak on issues that seasoned experts can barely navigate? Isn't this just another example of entitlement? The words were pointed, their intent unmistakable, and the studio fell into a tense silence. Barron blinked, his calm exterior showing no signs of the sting such a question might provoke. The journalist, emboldened by the lack of immediate reaction, pressed further. I mean, let's be honest, they continued, their tone sharper. You've had everything handed to you, haven't you? How can someone like you possibly relate to the struggles of real Americans? A murmur rippled through the audience. Some looked uncomfortable, others intrigued, while a few nodded in agreement. The tension was palpable. The camera focused on Barron, capturing the moment when he could have faltered under the weight of such public scrutiny. But he didn't. Barron sat up straighter, his eyes meeting the journalists with quiet determination. The room held its breath, waiting for his response. In that moment, it wasn't just a debate on a show. It was a test of character, a defining moment where Barron's reaction would speak volumes about who he was and what he stood for. The journalist's words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding, daring Barron to react. For a moment, the studio was silent except for the faint hum of the cameras. All eyes were on Barron, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The journalist's smirk lingered, confident that their pointed remarks had cornered the young man. It was a calculated move, designed to expose inexperience or provoke a misstep. Barron took a deep breath, his composure unwavering. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady and calm, but there was a flicker of something beneath the surface, an undeniable spark of resolve. You're right about one thing, he began, his voice firm but measured. I'm young, and I still have a lot to learn, but what I do know is that real leadership isn't about age or wealth. It's about listening, understanding, and standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. The audience shifted in their seats, a ripple of interest spreading through the room. The journalist's smirk faltered for a brief second, but they quickly recovered, firing back. "That's a nice sentiment, Barron. But words are easy. Actions are what matter. What have you done that proves you can relate to the struggles of ordinary people?" This was the turning point, the moment when the journalist expected Barron to stumble. But instead, Barron's expression softened, and he replied with quiet conviction. "I don't claim to have faced every struggle others have, but I've seen the resilience of people who have. I've worked with community groups, sat with families who've lost everything, and learned from their strength. My goal isn't to speak for them, it's to amplify their voices." His words landed with unexpected weight, the sincerity in his tone cutting through the tension. The audience, initially skeptical, began to nod, their expressions shifting from doubt to respect. The journalist, momentarily at a loss, leaned back in their chair. The dynamic in the room had changed, and Barron had turned what could have been a moment of humiliation into one of quiet triumph. The journalist, visibly caught off guard by Barron's composed and heartfelt response, tried to regain control of the narrative. "That's a noble perspective," they said, their tone dripping with skepticism. "But it still doesn't change the fact that you've lived a life of privilege. How can someone like you truly understand sacrifice or hardship?" Barron didn't flinch. Instead, he took a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You're right," he admitted, his voice calm but resolute. "I've been fortunate in many ways, and I'll never pretend otherwise. But privilege doesn't define a person. It's what they do with it that matters." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. Then, to the surprise of everyone, he leaned forward and shared a personal story. "Last year, I met a single mother of 3 who had lost her home after a natural disaster. She told me about how she worked double shifts to rebuild her life, never asking for pity, just a chance to keep moving forward. She's the one who taught me what true strength looks like." The audience listened intently, the studio now silent except for Barron's steady voice. "So I decided to help her, not by making it about me, but by connecting her with people who could. We found her a place to live, helped her kids get back in school, and made sure she had the support to rebuild. That wasn't about privilege. That was about seeing someone in need and doing something about it." The reveal struck a chord, leaving both the audience and the journalist momentarily stunned. The journalist, clearly not expecting such a genuine and selfless story, fumbled for a response but found none. Barron continued, his tone earnest. "It's not about proving anything. It's about understanding that if you have the ability to help, you should. That's what my parents taught me, and that's what I try to live by." As he finished, the silence in the studio broke into applause. People who had entered the room with doubts about him now looked on with admiration. Even the journalist, previously so intent on discrediting him, seemed to soften, their rigid posture easing as they nodded faintly in acknowledgement. Barron's act of kindness and humility had disarmed the criticism entirely, turning a moment of scrutiny into one of inspiration. As the applause in the studio slowly subsided, Barron leaned back in his chair, his composure intact. The journalist, who had initially approached him with skepticism and pointed attacks, now seemed quieter, their previous bravado replaced with a faint expression of introspection. The room felt different, less charged with tension, more connected by a shared sense of admiration for what had just transpired. Barron's words had resonated deeply, not because he had attempted to defend himself, but because he had spoken with honesty and humility. He hadn't tried to deflect the criticism or engage in a war of words. Instead, he had chosen to share a piece of himself, offering a glimpse into the values and principles that guided his actions. In doing so, he reminded everyone in the room of the power of kindness and the importance of using one's platform to uplift others. As the show wrapped up, Barron exchanged a brief, respectful nod with the journalist. It wasn't an admission of defeat on their part, but rather an acknowledgement that they had underestimated him. For Barron, there was no satisfaction in proving someone wrong, only in standing up for what he believed in. Walking off the stage, Barron reflected on the night's events. The confrontation could have easily turned into a spectacle, an opportunity for headlines and sound bites, but instead it had become something meaningful. He realized that his response, rooted in authenticity and empathy, had the power to shift perspectives, not just in the studio but for everyone watching. Later that evening, social media was abuzz with clips from the show. Barron's story of helping the single mother had gone viral, sparking conversations about privilege, responsibility, and the importance of action over words. Comments poured in, praising his maturity and poise. People shared their own stories of kindness, inspired by his message that even small actions could make a big difference. For Barron, the takeaway wasn't about the attention or accolades. It was about the reminder that in moments of challenge, character shines brightest. He knew he couldn't change everyone's opinion, but he also knew that wasn't the point. What mattered was staying true to his principles and using his voice to make a positive impact. Back at home, Barron sat quietly, reflecting on the day. His thoughts turned to the single mother and her children, whose resilience had taught him so much. He smiled faintly, knowing that their story, and now his, had the power to inspire others to act with courage and compassion. And in that moment, he felt not pride, but gratitude for the opportunity to show what truly mattered. As the world watched the clip of Barron's poised and heartfelt response, it became clear that his story was more than just a moment of confrontation. It was a reminder of the power of humility, kindness, and standing up for what is right. Barron didn't aim to win an argument or seek applause. He aimed to inspire action. His story wasn't about privilege or criticism. It was about what you do with the opportunities life gives you and how you use them to lift others. In a time when division often feels insurmountable, Barron's words cut through the noise, showing that courage and compassion can bridge the gaps. His reminder that even small acts of kindness can create lasting change resonated with millions, sparking a wave of positivity and reflection. This story is a call to action for all of us. What can you do today to help someone in need? How can you use your voice, your platform, or your time to make a difference? Let Barron's message inspire you to take a step, however small, toward creating a better world. If the story touched your heart, share it with others. Leave a comment about a time when someone's kindness changed your life, or when you stood up for what was right. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help spread messages of hope, compassion, and unity. Together, we can remind the world that character, courage, and kindness are values worth celebrating.